Damion, welcome.
Hey, it's great to see you, John.
So can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm a guy that just can't stop starting companies. I've been doing this, just starting companies for the last 30 years. I've started over 70 companies and taken them from zero to multiple millions. I've driven a bunch of them into the ground and lost a bunch of money. Uh, 10 to 15 years ago, I took a $25 million or $20 million portfolio, lost 25 million. So I was in the whole 5 million, went from zero to hero to homeless. and
Nice.
and since then have taken the experiences of starting all these companies and led that to building a community with several thousand people and have multiple companies now that I'm a founder and a co-owner in that are closing in on $1 billion valuation. And so I've kind of gone through the whole gamut of the things that you can do and the things you can do wrong. And now I've got a whole lot of experience, which I think they call wisdom. It's also called being bald because you lose all your hair in the process.
Yeah, I think getting into real estate and starting my own business, I've gotten a lot more white hair. You can't tell on the camera, but it definitely accelerates. So how do you do 70 companies in 30 years?
So one of the mistakes that I made was starting and running too many companies without having them have their own legs. So this is part of the experience when I hear people say, "Well, I've got five different companies." I laugh. I'm like, "Well, do you have you done a lot?" And they said, "Well, no, I'm just trying to get multiple streams of income." And that was my thinking back then too. It was
Mhm.
I'm going to have lots of streams of income, so I'll have lots of companies, and none of them really got legs. So there were times where I had 10 or 12 or 15 companies that were just struggling along. Maybe one of the companies had a couple of pieces of property, another company was an insurance company, or there's all these different things going on. And the problem is, when you're making nickels and dimes, you're forgetting about the dollars, and you got to be focused to actually have the dollars and then the millions and then the hundreds of millions. Like that doesn't happen when you're trying to start five. The reason you have five companies is because you're at a place where you have so much money and you have people that are running things, and so you need the diversity. But diversity is a diversification process if you're doing it too early.
Yeah, that's so true because I was in the same boat and I'm still finally starting to understand, focus on one thing first, have that be really successful, and then use the fruits of that labor to then go out and start something else.
That's it. That's exactly what you should be doing. I mean,
Mm.
unfortunately, people don't do that.
Mhm. So you said you had one company that had pieces of property, you had insurance company. Like what else have you built or started?
Well, there's been precious metals companies, retirement account companies, manufacturing companies. I had a detailing company. I got thrown out of college because I started a bookstore before Amazon got involved in college books.
Uh-huh.
And I mean, so anything that I saw as an entrepreneur, I just kept looking for. Well, I didn't really try to look. My soul just went out and saw problems everywhere. And when you're an entrepreneur, you can't help but to try to solve the problem with the business. You just say, "Oh, I can do this. I can fix this." And so it was all sorts of different things, some consulting things. I even had an iPad flipping business in Europe while I was
Mhm.
volunteering for a political campaign in 2010. That was a
Wow.
terrible idea. I mean, you don't even know what you don't know with literally tariffs and duties and international shipping and I mean it was nuts. So, but this is all part of the learning, and it's the mistake most people make is they try to hit a home run on their first at bat, their first swing, and what you don't realize is you got to go up and you got to strike out a bunch. You got to be okay and willing to embrace the singles. And what happens is over time you end up hitting 3 out of 10, and you go, wow, I'm a Hall of Famer. But it took a ton of time to get to the point where you were even hitting anything, and people are too impatient. And then ultimately they swing, they miss, they go, oh, that didn't work, and then they stop. And you really got to be willing to go past that and
Yeah.
focus and be resilient. Like Tim Grover talks about in his books, winning and resilience. It's about continuing to go at strikeout after strikeout and miss after miss. You got to keep going, and it's you don't really win or lose. You win or learn, and that's where people make a huge mistake. They just think, oh, it didn't work, so therefore I'm going to quit and do something else, and that's not the right answer.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what you said spoke to me where it's like always swinging for the fences and you're going to strike out a lot more that way. Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think a lot of people see the after effect. Like they look at Frametec, the manufacturing company that I've been working on and building the last few years, and they see this as it went from a napkin to $1 billion company in 3 years. It's this overnight success story, and what they're missing is almost 30 years before that, and all the companies, not just me, but all the people that are a part of it, there's this massive world-class team that has collectively a couple hundred years of experiences running businesses, having companies go bankrupt, all that stuff. So what people tend to see is just the highlight reel, the end product, and they don't see Justin Bieber the 10 years before he hit the main, hit the big
Yeah.
time, where he was playing a guitar when he was 4, 5, 6 years old. People
Mhm.
miss all that stuff, and that's where that's where all this the success happens, the foundation happens. Same thing with investing in business. It's the same deal. You got to do that work for a long time and be willing to plateau in the process of mastery. It doesn't just happen because you go up to the plate and swing and you hit a grand slam at the and you win the World Series. Like, that's not how this works.
Yeah, I think I saw a quote somewhere that says like it took me 10 years to become an overnight success. Something
It's
like
kind of a
that.
minimum. I mean, there's a process, and it's Malcolm Gladwell, I believe, was the one that talked about this, and that there's a 10,000 rule, 10,000 hour
Mm,
rule. And I would say that that's relatively true. I've done that in multiple things, whether it's business. I've done multiple things with 10,000 hours in martial arts. I spent more than 10,000 hours training, ended up
mhm,
with 4 different black belts, started my own martial art. All that stuff was a function of time. So people tend to say, okay, here's the outcome I want, and they focus on that instead of focusing on the things you can control, which are the drivers, the critical drivers for your business, your health, whatever. Like, you can,
mhm,
like, look, I've always wanted a six pack in my abs.
mhm,
I can't control the six pack. What I can control is the food that goes in my mouth and the amount of
mhm.
times I go to the gym, and what I do at the gym. So I can control those drivers and then let the outcome be the effect. But if you get obsessed too much with that, and there are things you can't control,
Mhm.
it's pretty frustrating. The thing that the key, the hack, if you will, is falling in love with the process and the things that you
Yeah.
can control.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. I mean, the book that you mentioned, Outliers, I think really stuck to me. It's like, well, people are where they're at because they have spent a lot of time working on their craft. And then another book that you had me thinking about was Chop Wood, Carry Water, which is all about not worrying so much about the outcome, but worrying about but enjoying the journey. And if you just enjoy the journey, it's going to be a much more enjoyable experience.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah. So, can we talk about this $20 million company that ended up 25 or 5 million in the hole? Like, what was that?
That was my real estate adventure when I went out there, and it's an interesting thing. If you look at the whole picture, it's easy to look backwards. So I started this thing, went to a seminar, read some books, and said, this is cool. I'm going to do what these guys said. So I did what they did, and I
Mhm.
did what they recommended, and it worked because I worked it. I worked it for 5 years, grinding away, buying houses, ended up with 150 houses in those 5 years. And I wasn't trying to get rich. I was trying to get rich, but I wasn't trying to get rich overnight. I was really just
Mhm.
doing the work. I wasn't out there flipping. I was buying stuff, holding it, and then the market naturally worked with me. And at one point in 2004, I started watching houses go up 10, 15% a month in Phoenix. And there was a surge. And I said, this doesn't make any sense. I'm going to exit this. Started selling everything off, sold everything off over the next 18 months, ended up with millions of dollars, and thought, man, I'm super smart. I happen to be really good at timing. I was lucky. And so,
Uh-huh.
I was mistaking my intellect for luck. And it doesn't mean that it's better to be lucky than good sometimes. But
Mhm.
I went back into the market and ended up going into different states, doing different developments, apartments, condo development, big multi-million dollar flips, and had 7 different projects that I was expecting to make another million each. The
Yeah.
opposite happened. I lost more than a million each, and all the equity in the portfolio all went away. So it went from 20 million to negative 5 million in 12 months. And that was a reckoning. It was where, wow, I did not realize how wrong I could be. We definitely underestimate how wrong we can be. We think, oh, worst case is this. The reality is, until you've been through cycles, until you have some scar tissue, you have absolutely no idea how wrong you can be. You can be like, you can go, let's say you go buy a house, a $1 million house, and you put $100,000 down, and you go, my exposure is 100,000, but you have a $900,000 loan. Your exposure is $1 million. And I tell you that from
Mhm.
experience. When I bought an apartment, and it ended up, I lost it to foreclosure, and then the lender ended up suing me. And he sued me because of a deficiency, where he went and auctioned the property off, and he got somebody to go buy it for like literally nickels. And that somebody was him. He bought it back, already had it sold to somebody else, but then sued me for the difference. and this is the kind of stuff you don't even realize is possible. And then I
Mhm.
fought 2 years and I won because it was a fraudster. So you don't realize the exposure you have until you go through this stuff, which is why it's so valuable to have mentors that have gone through things, and how priceless it is, no matter what check you write, to people that have been through stuff, because they can see around the corners. It's like they have X-ray vision.
Man, that's so interesting that you mentioned that because actually in the process of selling all my single family homes, and then I'm saying, oh, I'm gonna take this much money, I'm gonna put it here, here, and here, and I just didn't think about, all right, well, what if I am wrong? So what? How do I? So what would you have done? I know, you've learned a lot from that experience, but looking back, what could you have done differently to prevent yourself from getting in the hole?
I got this advice my grandmother told me, and it was advice she got from my grandfather before he died. He said, if anything major happens, a big financial event, like somebody dies and there's an inheritance, the first
Mm,
thing you do is nothing for a year. And it's
mm,
because you have to evolve. Your being has to evolve into a different level of wealth or assets or whatever it is. There's a change. And what most people do, the reason people win the lottery, and that's basically what happens when you have a big event financially, you sell a bunch of assets, and all of a sudden you got a bunch of cash. The lottery effect is it's not normal for you. So you try to get back to normal, which means you do stupid things. You buy a yacht or a plane or whatever. You end up
uh,
dating 15 women or, whatever, something stupid.
mm,
And then in this process, you go back to what you're comfortable with. It's your thermostat where you're high and you're low, like you stay in a range. So the advice was don't do anything for a year. And my advice to myself, if I was going back, would be chill out, don't do anything for a year, go work on yourself, because you got to remold yourself into the person that is the being around that money. So I wouldn't have just gone on vacation, but what I would have done is I would have spent time going to seminars. I would have found mentors that had gone through it, and I would start evolving myself. What I did instead was I was really uncomfortable. And so I did what you're talking about. I threw all this money all over the place and
mm,
lost it all. I was very scattered, very egotistical. And so the most money I could have made would have been to do nothing other than work on myself. And that's what most people don't want to do because they're impatient and they have this anxiety. They got to do something.
mm.
They got to have their money working. You can have a lazy balance sheet and make far more money than being anxious and throwing your money into stupid things like meme coins or some dumb thing. But people don't do that because
Yeah.
they're not comfortable with where they're at, and so they try to blow it up.
That's so interesting. And then, yeah, the what you mentioned there about going back to normal, it just reminds me of this book by Joe Dispenza, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. You just unconsciously revert back to what you were used to.
And that's what people do. I mean, that's the easiest way to see the most obvious thing is watching people with the lottery. But I've seen family members that inherited money, and it's really no different when you go from a certain type of lifestyle where you have a certain amount of income, and all of a sudden something happens. Your Bitcoin goes up 100x or something, or your house doubles, and you're like, wow, all of a sudden I have an extra million or two, and I didn't have that in the bank. Anytime these things happen, the best thing you can do is pause, not for a day or a week. The other thing that's
Mm,
going to happen is when you have money, everybody will have an idea for you, an
mm.
idea for you to loan them the money, an investment to put it in. Everybody's going to have, as soon as they know you have money, all the life insurance salespeople are going to try to sell you life insurance because it's the best thing you can do to protect yourself in a downturn. Like everybody has an idea for your money. So the best thing you can do is shut your mouth and hide.
Okay, so in that case, I'm not selling anything. All of my cash is stuck in equity.
Might not be a terrible idea.
Okay, so then the way that I know you is through your self-directed retirement account called company called EQRP. How do you start something like that?
As an entrepreneur, you see a problem. The problem I saw was one, most people are the only asset they really have is a retirement account. They have a 401k from an employer that maybe you turned into an IRA. They have this money and they're just hoping they don't run out of money. So they don't really have any feeling of control. And usually they don't have enough in there, so they're just afraid. And I saw that firsthand with my parents. My dad, in the last years of his life, which was about a decade ago, he was running low because he didn't really have any understanding. One, he didn't really understand how money and investing worked, and two, he didn't know he could control it. So he was just in the stock market hoping it actually grew, and it ended up running out. So that was pretty painful watching. And I thought I gotta help people. I want to make sure that more people are free from this and not stuck by it. And then I had a friend of mine. I'd say, hey, I want to buy some silver with my 401k, and I said, okay. I didn't realize you could do that. So at the time, I was running a precious metals company, and this guy bought some metals, and I thought, huh, I need to do some research here. Realize that you can do all these other things with retirement money, like buying gold, silver. You can buy Bitcoin. Bitcoin was new at that time. You can buy real estate. You can do all these things, and most people had no idea. And so I said, well, there's an opportunity here to educate people and give them a tool, and then give them some coaching and create a community around this. And that's what happened over the last decade. Thousands of people are now part of that community, and they have control of their retirement account. And the people, our community works together, as you know, that you have access to each other and a team and investment opportunities. And so we get stronger and wealthier together. And so that's ultimately what we've created, is that place.
Yeah, I think that's what drew me to your company more than any other companies because there's actual community where people are trading ideas, they're trading opportunities. How did how did the idea of creating a community come about?
Years and years of spending time in masterminds and groups, and realizing that it was always better to be around people that were thinking, especially when you're a crazy person. And I say
Mm,
crazy person because if you're an entrepreneur, you're literally crazy compared to most people that are out there as
mm,
robots doing their thing, going through the motions. And they look at you when you have a dream and you're like, man, I'm going to create 10 times more of whatever in my life. I'm going to have bigger impact than just punching a clock for 40 years and getting a watch. When you think like that, it's really important to be around people. And in the beginning, all I had was books and tapes, which are cool, but I didn't really have people. And then that evolved into some masterminds and things. Most people are scattered, like they're all over the place. So that our community
mm.
is all over the world, tons in the U.S., and then we have people elsewhere in Europe and Australia, that like expats that have literally left the U.S. and they still have retirement money, so they have this stuff, and they get to be a part of the real people. And it's not just a tool, but like you said, that's the thing that draws people in. And I knew that because it's valuable. We have a better experience. One of our basic human needs, one of the six human needs, is connection. And it doesn't matter how much money you have if you're disconnected from people. One, it's a lot scarier, and two, it's just not as fulfilling. So this was part of serving people, giving them freedom, and also helping them find each other.
Yeah. And then you also have opportunities where you kind of control how people can deploy their money, right? You mentioned this company called Frametech. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so one of the things that's happened over the years, because of my experience having invested, being a professional investor for decades, and really doing everything dumb under the sun, I've paid a lot of dumb tax, and it allowed me to learn and be able to create things that were really world class because I've done all the dumb ones. And so there's an opportunity. I thought, well, shoot, a lot of people are looking for great deals. Let's see what I can create. And that's Frametech came together with some guys that were great operators and are now my partners. And I'm literally on site with them, working and building these plants out to help solve the housing crisis. And it was the people that came together at the right time with the right idea. And what happened is our community, I knew our community had a lot of cash sitting looking for something great. And I knew that I was willing to put my money where my mouth was. And so I committed millions of my own dollars to this deal, and then invited people to be a part of it. And people stepped up, and $100 million later, we've got a plant that's operating and another one under construction. And we just launched our entrance into Texas. So we'll be in multiple states, and we're doing everything we can to literally solve the housing crisis in America.
So are you building the frames of the houses or actually building the houses from ground up?
So we're building all the bones. So we're an integrated framing contractor. And what's interesting about Frametech is it's not doing it the way that it used to be done, or most people do it. They have wood in the field and they swing hammers. We're actually
Mm,
taking plans in an automated manufacturing plant, taking the plans for a house that the builder gives us. We take those plans and we build all the walls, the floors, the trusses, and then our team takes them out on our trucks, and we put it together. So instead of taking a week or two, it takes us a couple of days to put a house up in terms of the framing, and everything is literally 10 times better quality. There's nothing that's wiggling around. Your trusses are straight, the plates are on where they're supposed to be.
mm.
And so the quality looks like furniture. It doesn't actually look like a house the way that traditionally houses are, where they're not exactly straight. and
Mhm.
you look down the line and your plates aren't exactly the same height. We do things to make the quality 10 times better, 4 times faster. And what's crazy is because of the efficiencies, we're able to reduce the waste by over 95%. So instead of a dumpster full of wood, which is costly because the homeowner is going to end up paying for that with all the extra resources, we're able to
Mhm.
reduce that down to between 1 and 5%.
So you're building the frames inside of a warehouse.
We build all the it's a component, so all the pieces. So we're
Uh,
basically saying, okay, you give us the plans for a 2,000 foot house or a 10,000 foot house or an apartment or
mhm.
a hotel, and then we build all the bones. We're like the orthopedic framers. Like we literally just we do that one piece, we do it really well, and
Mhm.
there's nobody in the world that does it better than we do. Literally, there's it's once you compare, and we've had this happen where we put up a house, it was framed, and next door was a traditionally site built framed house. It was
Mhm.
so obvious how different they were. The builder came up and said, we're not doing anything else site built. We want you guys to build all of our framing going forward.
But that's great because my wife's gotten crazy into like mold and all that. And so one of the biggest complaints about that is, well, when you're building a house, it gets rained on and then it gets closed up. But then if you're building all the components and you're able to speed that process up, then there's less chances for mold to, or yeah, no chance for mold to grow on the frame.
Right. There, the wood normally that would sit out on site, it would be there in the elements for however many days or weeks. It doesn't it and it's a lot of it gets stolen. But the other thing is the elements impact the integrity of the wood, and there's a mold issue. When we bring our stuff out and put it together within a couple of days, and then all of the roofing and everything goes on right after that, you
Mhm.
literally don't have the opportunity for the elements to hurt it because everything gets covered up and plastic and everything else. So it's a way safer thing environmentally in a lot of ways, including the mold.
Yeah, I do like that. I'm hoping that you expand to Virginia when I decide to move back to Virginia, then we can use your services.
It's going
Uh,
everywhere. I mean, these things are if you go to frametech.com, frametec.com, you'll see the national rollout where the sites for the different plants are targeted. And so they're literally all over the country. And any major population center is ultimately gonna have these frame tech plants because it's what's needed. We have to have them everywhere. We're not building enough housing.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, cool. So I appreciate you talking about both your the retirement account company and Frametech. I do have a question about mindset. Like, what's the biggest mindset issue that you've had to overcome uh, to get to this point now?
The biggest one is being concerned about what people think of you.
Uh-huh.
And for a long time, even not until recently, there was still some hangups around trying to make other people happy. And instead of saying, you know what, you get to a point where you can kind of fake it in the beginning because
Mhm.
the reason you fake it is because you don't have the experience. So for you
Right.
to say something with any type of conviction, you're literally just pretending because you don't
Hmm.
even know. You think, you hope, but once
Right.
you've done things for a while, it doesn't take 20 or 30 years, but you've done some things. What we tend to do is we still get concerned about what people think. So if we're stretching, if we're moving, we're still wanting to people to be comfortable, and you don't realize how imprisoned you are by that mindset. The mindset of freedom is where you don't care what people think. And it doesn't mean you don't care about people. It's what you don't care. What they think about you is none of your business. It's
Mhm.
not of any of your concern. What's of your concern is how you live your life. And when you look in the mirror, what you think about that person. And that was a big lesson that took me a long time. It took me decades to get clear on that and be really close to not caring at all. That's when you're really free to be able to live your potential and make the decisions. And it doesn't mean you're going to be right all the time. But it means that you're certain. And I have a saying that I may be wrong, but I'm never in doubt. So you've got to find a way where you're certain, you're willing to make the commitment vocally to people, your team, your partners, investors, whoever you're working with, and then when you're wrong, you admit it and you move on. But you're never waffling and you're never trying to make sure that other people are feeling all cozy. Like you got to be willing to be bold, and that's where
Mhm.
most people fall short. They just aren't willing to be bold because they want people to like them.
Right. I remember Dean Graziosi, he said that they don't make statues of nor they only make statues of crazy people.
It's true. They don't make statues of critics. It's only crazy people.
Yeah. You mentioned team. When it comes to starting a new venture, I mean, what's your first like action to, are you building a team? Are you coming up with the idea? Like, what are you doing?
Well, if you're going to build a team, you got to have a vision. If you're going to go out there and do something, the world-class teams follow vision and they follow purpose. They don't just follow passion. And that's one of the biggest mistakes too. People say, "Well, I'm passionate about something." And I go, "That's a stupid thing to go do." And they say, "Why?" Because I'll never work a day in my life. I'm like, "Okay, I got it. All the platitudes, all the things that you've heard people say. What will keep you going is purpose. What will keep you going is a North Star for something that's impactful externally on other people and not just yourself. That's the big shift. And if you have something that's big enough, people will follow you. People that, like our chief operating officer at Frametech, saw what we're doing, saw our mission while we were still dirt, before we had anything built, and he said, "You know what, this is the winning team. I want to be on this team." And he came over, and now he's one of the most important people on the team. And it was because he saw the vision, and he got it. And it was the North Star that pulled him over. So if you don't have a North Star, you're not going to get great people. If you don't have great people, you're going to have an average experience, you're going to have an average impact, and your results are going to suck. So it's really about making sure you've got this bold vision. And look, I'm not saying you start off saying I'm going to Mars when you've never actually shot like a little toy rocket. Like that's
Mhm.
probably a bad idea. So people
Right.
tend to gap. If you can envision something that's bigger, that's 10 or 100x from where you are, that's great. What people tend to do is they say, "Okay, I'm going to go from 0 to 10,000x," and nobody's going to believe you. Even you won't believe you. You'll say it, but your psyche won't believe you. So you got to be willing to stretch so people will follow the vision, because there's a proverb, without vision people perish. I mean, that's basically summing it up, kind of screwing it up, but that's basically
Mhm.
the essence of it. And that's the key. You got to have something. If you say, "I just need to hire somebody to do tasks," they're going to leave. I've had tons of people that I hired, brought in, and they didn't feel compelled, they weren't inspired, and they found something else for more money, because that mattered more when they didn't have the vision and they didn't feel like there was an opportunity to stretch. If you're 10 or 100xing, that's your vision, people are going to feel compelled to stretch. So that's what it takes to start something. And then you got to be willing to stick with it. If you're just a scatterbrained drunk squirrel chasing shiny nuts,
Mhm.
you're going to be lost doing the next thing, and you're never going to get any traction. And that's important, to not get diversified too early.
Right. What does it take to create like a strong enough vision for people to come follow you?
You got to find a big enough problem, a big enough pain, and you got to say, "Am I willing to do whatever it takes?" Most people are not. The difference between super successful people and people that are just average, one, people that are super successful say no to almost everything, so they hold that vision, and they also have the ability to endure unbelievable amounts of pain, emotional pain, physical pain. Like one of the things you can do, it's kind of funny. It's Joe Rogan talks about this. He's like, "Man, I get in the cold plunge every morning. I go in there. This crazy ass gets in there at 37 degrees. I can't handle it. My like things start falling off of me." But
Uh,
you get in there, it's the hardest thing you're going to do that day, and then you make sales calls or you got to go be rejected all day. You're like, "Man, this doesn't even hurt." So
right.
it's the pain that people are not willing to endure. It's something hurts, they go, "Ooh, I don't want to do this. This, like, I stubbed my toe." It's like, man, get used to getting punched in the face, and then when somebody threatens you with a to swing at you, you're just like, I mean, you can if you want to, but then I'm just going to keep going. So all of a sudden people look at like a crazy person. So you have to be willing to say, "No, I'm going to focus on this thing," and then be willing to take a lot of hits. That's how people win. I mean, there's no other way around it. Anything else is a lottery event that's going to go away as fast as it showed up.
Yeah. I do like that enduring pain. Something that I did not know I was getting myself into when going down this path. But it has been like a lot of like high highs, right? But then also low lows too, that you just have to find a way to get pushed through.
It's a hell of a roller coaster, and that's one of the reasons that community is so important. Having masterminds, having mentors, having people around you that aren't just your family and friends, and the people that love you, that don't want to see you hurt. Like there are people that will say, "Oh, just don't worry about it. Just do something else that's safe," because they literally want to see you safe. They don't want to see you in pain. But if you want to go after your dreams, there's going to be a pain involved. I don't care if you're an
Right.
Olympian like Simone Biles or you're Mark Cuban. Like it doesn't make any difference what your goal is, your aspirations. If you're going to get to something bigger than just status quo, like a merry-go-round of your life, next year is like last year, you're going to
Mhm.
stretch, and stretching hurts. And
Yeah.
being around people that are doing that, it'll normalize it. So this is why you have masterminds. You're around people that are doing the thing. You're like, "Oh, this is normal. Okay, I'm going to get back up." If you get hit in the face and fall down, and you're the only one that's stretching, people around you are going to say, "Oh, you shouldn't do that. That's a bad idea. You should avoid it. So stop doing it. Be safe. Be with us." They're going to pull you in like a crab in the box. And
Mm.
that's the difference when you have a great community around you. You're going to get lifted out of the box by your community, not pulled into it.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I used to get annoyed by this thing, like being in the right rooms with the right people, but it really is true. I mean, there's no way around it. The more you spend time around people that are doing what it is that you want to do, or just like are going at places that you where you want to get to, it makes a huge difference. It just expands your mind.
It that's the biggest hack. People say, "What do I do first?" I'm like, "Get your ass in a different room." And
Yeah.
the room you're in is probably not the room you should be in. And it's like if you're by yourself in your house, you're spending all your time at a job where you're just, you're hoping you'll get a 3 or 5% raise this year and you have bigger dreams, you're in the wrong room. The problem is people are like, "Ah, yeah, but if I get to it, if I like leave that room, then I'm going to starve to death." And the reality is, no, you probably won't. You just won't be able to have all that stuff that is chasing you, all the marketing and all the
Mm.
immediacy that you think you want. But what you really want at a deep fundamental level is to tap into your potential and not wake up one day at the end of your life and go, man, I regret I didn't go for it. I didn't do the thing. I just played safe, tiptoeing safely to death's door. That's what most people do. So you got to, if you hack yourself and you put yourself in a different room, it's back to normalizing what you say, what you think, how you spend, what you invest in. You don't look at things as risky. You look at how do I risk mitigate. It's a totally
Exactly.
different way of approaching things.
Yeah.
And if you're in the wild with most people, the general public doesn't know how to mitigate risk. They don't even know what the word means. They go, "Ooh, it's risky," and then they stop. They're like a reptile.
Right.
They stop. They go, "Arr," and they're like a deer getting run over by life. And that's, if you want something different, you've got to be thoughtful and you got to do something different. You got to get around different people.
Yeah, for sure. Um, yeah, I didn't even think about that either. Is everything has risk, right? If you stay where you're at, there's risk involved. But no matter what you do, whether you do or don't, there's some type of risk involved.
It doesn't matter what you do. You're exactly right. You
Yeah.
can be on a train track that has nothing happening and it's sunny. And if you're there long enough, you're going to have a hurricane, you're going to have a blizzard, and you're going to have 100 trains run over you. So
Yeah.
standing still is as dangerous as running in the dark. Like it doesn't make any difference. The question is, how are you going to mitigate it? Are you going to be
Yeah.
smart? Are you going to run with lights? Are you going to stand there and have your eyes open? Are you going to take a nap on the tracks? Like there's all these different, and these are all the choices. This is what we can control. You can't control when the train's going to come. Can't control the blizzard, but you can control what you're doing on the tracks or off the tracks. It's up to you. And that's the extreme self-responsibility where everything in your life is your responsibility and you control it. And if you say, well, I don't control the blizzard, you do control how you react to it and you control how you prepare for it. So you have a lot more control. People just abdicate responsibility and then they blame somebody. That we saw that and we've seen that over and over in a lot of elections in the
Mhm.
US and probably around the world where people are just blaming somebody else. And I laugh. I'm like, who cares who gets elected? You have more control over your life than they do. And you may say, well, they're going to change the taxes or they're going to instill laws. And I'm like, are you in prison? You have control of your life if you choose
Yeah.
to have control of your life. Otherwise, you're just a damn victim. And nobody actually respects victims, including you.
Right. And all these people that we talk about that are higher up, they don't care about you. They don't know about you. You're just there. You only have control over your life. And that was something that it was a big realization.
It's a big aha and it's a big shift. People oftentimes try to abdicate responsibility. They might think they're delegating, but they're actually abdicating, and then they get pissed off because things
Mm.
happen. And it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, well, you weren't really delegating with any type of accountability. You were abdicating and just hoping it would all work out. So you had it coming. Like, let's be real. And people don't like hearing that, but it's true.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Damien, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your experience and providing a lot of really cool value and insights into what it's like in this world. So you mentioned frametech.com. I'll make sure to have that in the description. How else can people reach out to you?
John, I created a book and I thought it was really relevant. It's a 10 step book. It's 10 steps to 10 million and it's about 10 minutes. And what
Okay.
it did is I took all the stuff I've been doing the last 30 years, all these companies, creating a unicorn, which is $1 billion company, creating a net worth that went from, zero to millions to -5 million, up to millions, 10 millions, 100 million plus. And so I took all that experience and there's principles that are involved in doing that anybody can duplicate. And I built this downloadable book. And I what I'd hope is people will take that thing and download it and say, okay, you know what? I this is a principle that will help me. This one I don't like, but there's a reason they're all in there. And in 10 minutes,
Mhm.
you're going to have foundational principles that took me 30 years to get to, and it's free. So at turnkeyretirement.com, you can download that thing and use it. It's not theory. This has been my life, and it's the proof is in the pudding. When somebody has created something, it's pretty hard to say that they don't know what they're talking about, or you're going to go find something else and do it your way. My suggestion is model after people that have already done it. And this is a model of how I did it and how other people have done it, consolidated into something you can consume pretty much when you're on the toilet. It's that fast.
Very cool. Yeah, I'm looking forward to reading that. I don't enjoy reading much, but that's something that I'm definitely gonna read.
Good.
So Damien, again, thank you so much for coming on. It was a great conversation and great to meet you.
Likewise, appreciate you having me.